With New York City being one of the top places to live in all of the country, many people looking to move into the Big Apple struggle to find affordable housing or even find themselves overpaying for the apartments they are able to get a lease for. Many renters blame the high cost of rent on the high demand for housing that has always existed in New York City. Although this is part of the reason living in New York is so expensive, we will reveal the underlying causes of such high rents by taking a look at the current policy that has a noose around the neck of New York City landlords. Rent stabilization has been around since 1974 in New York City, and this is when a tenant's rent is set and predictable at a lower rate to help combat the affordable housing crisis in the city. However, when the COVID-19 pandemic occurred, landlord-tenant policy significantly changed in favor of tenants with the passing of HSTPA, the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act that passed in June of 2019. Such laws have become so drastic in favor of tenants that they're actually contributing to the lack of affordable housing and high rents, and in turn, hurting tenants. Before this act was passed, landlords were able to overcome rent stabilization to operate at a profit in several ways. If a tenant left or died, the owner got back possession of the unit, could renovate it, and bring it back to the free market. With HSTPA, this is no longer the case. In fact, if a family member of a rent-stabilized tenant lives with them for at least 2 years, they are then entitled to live in that apartment for the next 50 years at the same rent level. So landlords do not have the right to exclude anymore, but the tenant who lives in the unit does. And they can choose who lives in the landlord's property, depriving the landlord of his own property rights. Before HSTPA, landlords were able to claim several units back for their own use. Now, you could only claim one, and the standards to do so are almost impossible for any landlord to reach. Owners who used to have good cause eviction, where the failure to pay rent, committing or permitting a nuisance or criminal activity, passing a certain income threshold, or committing substantial lease violations, all qualified as reasons for eviction. Under the current legislation, this is also no longer the case. Furthermore, landlords no longer have the ability to turn their apartments into co-ops or condos for sale. They can't choose to demolish it and replace the building with something new, or change its property use from multifamily to office if they so pleased. If a person earned too much, landlords used to be able to challenge the right to live in rent-stabilized units. They can no longer do this under HSTPA, and there are people earning over $250,000 paying $1,000 rent-stabilized apartments in New York City. How can politicians even do this? How is it allowed? Well, I wondered the same things. In the past, the state was able to amend laws about every 6 years by declaring an emergency, since this is the only situation where constitutional rights can be suspended. However, in 2019, with the COVID pandemic, the state declared a permanent emergency, allowing them to perpetually remove property rights from New York City landlords and putting all of these rules into place. So why am I telling you about landlord and tenant rights before and after HSTPA, and how does this affect rent rates? How could the policy be the reason behind the skyrocketing rates in New York City? Well, before HSTPA, landlords were able to recoup losses from any rent-stabilized units by renovating several units after they got them back, and they would bring them to free market rates for the next tenant. Now, the landlord is forced to receive 1974 income levels from protected rent-stabilized units while operating at 2024 expense levels. The rents they are receiving isn't even enough to cover the heating of the building, let alone come close to its expenses. This is why you see so many multifamily buildings boarded up in New York City, because operators lose less money by leaving the units vacant than they do when they have a tenant inside. So it is more costly for landlords to actually rent their apartments than to not. And when landlords used to have a way to recoup losses and operate at a profitable level, the changes in HSTPA virtually give owners 0% chance to make any money, and such terrible policy has led to about 50 to 75,000 vacant apartment units across Manhattan. Not only do these rules prevent real estate owners from making money, but it revokes their ability to maintain the condition of the property, making it fundamentally and economically unviable to operate rent-stabilized multifamily for anyone in New York City. Just to get a unit back to rentable condition in New York City can cost over $100,000. But landlords are capped at $15,000 a unit through substandard rehab laws, which might not even be enough to renovate a bathroom nowadays. For this, tens of thousands of apartment units are sitting vacant instead of contributing to the market supply. So although there is always a demand for living in New York City, the severe supply imbalance that makes headlines in the papers is truly because of the senseless democratic laws that cause 1. Landlords to lose less money keeping rentable units vacant rather than rent them out, and 2. Prevent landlords from renovating out of date units and putting them up for rent, since they no longer have the ability to gain possession back of their own property from tenants, and even if they could, it would make absolutely no sense to do so, since they can't charge market rent rates to pay for their renovations. Why would anyone spend $100,000 on a unit to still receive the same income that they did before the renovation, to receive $500 a month in the third most expensive city in the world? So this policy has been absolutely disastrous for New York City, its real estate owners, and more so, even its tenants. If the 75,000 vacant units were brought to market and landlords could regain possession of their own units for proper causes, we would see more supply absorbing the demand for New York City living and keeping rents from skyrocketing as they have been since 2019. This chart shows just how much rent has gone up since 2019, and recently hitting an all-time high of $3,500 a month, with some rents even asking up to $7,000. And this is not talking about luxury apartment units. The overall vacancy rate for multifamily housing is currently 1.4%. Meaning that any new units that get listed on the market almost immediately get rented out and usually cause a bidding war between the soon-to-be tenants who want to live in the unit. The need for housing, especially in New York, will always be there, and HSTPA prevents the leasing and rehabilitation of tens of thousands of multifamily units across New York City, restricting supply below that demand for living and causing inherently high rent prices everyone complains about. Now that we have covered what HSTPA was and how it changed policy for the worse, not just for landlords, but tenants as well, it begs the question, what is being done about this? Thankfully, this situation is on the way to the Supreme Court as 335-7 LLC versus City of New York is going to claim that these laws are unconstitutional and a violation of our Fifth Amendment right, which states that the government cannot take private property without paying for it. And that is essentially what the government is doing by granting a life estate to tenants in someone else's property. This hearing is a few months out from being officially decided to be heard or not by the Supreme Court, which will happen around June this summer. If this happens, the Supreme Court will be hearing 335-7 LLC versus City of New York in the fall, with a decision resulting in the spring of 2025. If they rule the current set of laws are unconstitutional, Albany would have to replace the current laws with new ones that abide by the Supreme Court ruling, and hopefully this brings about the change New York City needs to correct its apparent supply imbalance as a result of these poor policies. In this video, we covered how rent stabilization was before the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, and how it allowed landlords to actively contribute to the housing supply and bring more units in competition with market rates, helping combat the supply crisis and rising rent rates. Then, we mentioned how things have changed since the passing of this law, and how these policies have restricted landlords' ability to do so, in turn, hurting tenants more than they have helped them. So hopefully 335-7 LLC versus City of New York gets heard and decides in favor of the changes the 5 plaintiffs are seeking. New York City needs change soon, and fingers crossed this is a step in the right direction. Now you know the underlying truth behind climbing rent rates and why people looking for housing can't catch a break here in New York City. If you are looking for a place to live and are tired of renting, I am a Brooklyn and Long Island realtor and can help you find the right place. My contact information is listed in the description below, and I would be happy to help you with any of your real estate needs, whether that is buying or selling, or even looking to invest in multifamily yourself. If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe to the channel for much more informative videos to come, keeping you up to date on everything Brooklyn real estate. And as always, thank you for watching.